I want to talk about a question that came up in EMDR consultation because I think it reflects really thoughtful clinical work. And the question was, what do you use as the positive cognition when the negative cognition is, I'm not in control? Especially when it's true that none of us are ever fully in control. And I love this question because it shows real discernment. Most therapists can catch the tension pretty quickly. If we choose a positive cognition that sounds like I'm in control, we can end up moving too far from reality because nobody is in full control of external events, other people, or most outcomes. So if that belief doesn't feel true in the body, it's probably not the one that we want to install. So for me, this target of I'm not in control, it often comes back to something more grounded, which is choice. And sometimes we can call them options as well, depending on the client's language. You know, I have choices versus I have options. So when the negative cognition is, I have no control, a positive cognition that often fits well is I have choices. So because it's not saying I can control everything. It's basically saying like, I may not be able to control everything, but I'm not without agency. And that distinction matters because many clients are not actually asking for omnipotence. They're trying to come out of this state of helplessness. And they're trying to remember that even in uncertainty, they may still have a response, a direction, a boundary, what's the next step, or just a way to relate to what's happening. And so that is often where that adaptive resolution lies. And so I was reminded of this recently with a client, actually a former client. She completed treatments years ago, but she occasionally reaches out when life gets especially heavy and she knows, all right, life's getting heavy, time to slow down, come back in. She had been hit with several stressors in a short period of time, just one after another. And with the last one just really tipping things over. And so the feeling that emerged was essentially like, well, what else is going to go wrong? I have no control over my life. So we identified the recent target, the negative cognition, and we began reprocessing. And so what ended up happening, which sometimes happens in EMDR, is the material started to shift to imagery before it fully shifted into words. So at one point she found herself like carrying a rock and it would fall down and she would need to rest and then pick up this rock and then it would fall down. But when the adaptive shift happened, she noticed herself floating down a river and coming to a fork in the river. And one direction felt dark and stormy and the other one felt bright and open. But what stood out was that like not one side erased the other. It was that she had to choose, right? The imagery evolved again, and then she saw herself driving on a highway with exits on both sides. And some exits felt dark and some felt bright. Some felt uncertain. But again, the theme was not control over the whole road. The theme was choice. I have choice in direction. I have choice in pace. I have choice where to exit and what to build and how to engage. And she began to notice something else, which I thought was clinically appropriate. She was carrying too much emotionally, and her perspectives had narrowed under that stress. So as the reprocessing continued, more options became visible. And not because life suddenly became simple, and not because every option felt good, and not because that uncertainty even disappeared, but these options became more visible because her mind and her body were no longer locked in that belief that she had none, no choices. So that's why I think I have choices can be such a strong positive cognition for I'm not in control, because it stays close to reality, it doesn't overpromise, and it supports exactly what we're trying to help the client access: autonomy, flexibility, discernment and trust in their own capacity to respond. So, some clients, that wording may vary. It may be like, I have options, I can choose what I do next, I can respond, I have some say, but the core is similar because we're not trying to replace one extreme with another. We're not moving from I have no control to I control everything. We're moving towards something steadier. I am not powerless here, and that can be enough. And honestly, sessions like that are why I value EMDR so much. There is something deeply meaningful about watching a client move from constriction into possibility. And not because we handed them certainty, but because they were able to reconnect with their own agency. And that's a different kind of control. Maybe not control in the absolute sense, but in the sense of choice, perspective, and self-trust becoming available again. And for many clients, that is the shift.